In today's video, we are going to be rounding decimals to the thousandths place. As always, let's start with our vocabulary. Really, here all we need to know is we need to know the rules of rounding. In the rules of rounding, which I'm sure you have done before, we look at a certain place value and we determine, is the number behind it 5 or greater? If it is, then we round up. Or is the number behind it 4 or less? And if it is, we keep it the same. Again, here's our place value chart that you should have written somewhere in your notebook and become familiar with those vocabulary words: tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay, let's start out with some practice. So in these two problems here, it has a number underlined that it would like us to round to. For the first problem, it has 673 thousandths, and it wants us to round to the hundredths place, which is the 7. Now what I like to do, because sometimes the number that they want you to round to, or the place value, is not always underlined. Sometimes it'll just say round to the hundredths place. What I like to do is I like to draw an arrow above. That was a stinky looking arrow. Let me restart that. I like to put an arrow right above the number that I am rounding. And that lets me know that that's the one that I'm going to change or keep the same. So what I do, because I'm rounding to the hundredths place, I look over to the thousandths place. And I look at that number to see if it's 5 or higher, I round that 7 up. If it's 4 or lower, then I keep the 7 the same and I drop everything else off. So I look behind the 7 and I see that there is a 3 there. So that means that it is lower than 5, lower than 4 actually, and I'm going to drop it off and keep the 7 the same. So this number would then be changed to 67 hundredths. Now I really want to make something clear here. When we are rounding, we are making sure that our answers are precise. Being precise means that we are closely looking at what place value is it asking me to round to. It's asking me to round to the hundredths place, which means that my answer should end at the hundredths place. Even though in the past we have said that everything else behind it gets dropped and it becomes a 0, this is not being precise, because now if I read the number, to me it says 670 thousandths. Is that the number that I wanted to round to? No, I wanted to round to the hundredths place. So that means that this 0 is not acceptable. Do not put zeros after the number because we need to be precise. Okay? So let's see in the next one if you can be precise. Go ahead and pause the video, round to the ones place, which is the underlined digit, and make sure that you are being precise. Okay, so we have the number 12 and 917 thousandths. It's asking me to round to the ones place, which is this 2. I'm going to look to its next door neighbor, the number right next to it, which is a 9. That is greater than 5, which means that I'm going to round the 2 up to a 3. So that means my answer is 13. If you are being precise, then you did not put 13.0 or 13.00 or 13.0000, because we know that there are infinite numbers of zeros behind it. But if we are being precise, then we know that we only round to the ones place. Okay, let's do some close and careful reading, because in these questions there is no underlined digit, so you're going to have to really pay attention to what place value is it asking me to round to. The first one says, what is 4 and 127 rounded to the nearest hundredth? So, like I said before, I like to make sure that I have that number like an arrow pointed right above it. So it's telling me the hundredth place, which is right here. It is the 2. So I'm going to look to the neighbor right next to it, which is a 7, which is greater than 5, which means that I round the 2 up to a 3. So my answer would become 4 and 12 hundredths. No zero behind it. Okay. Take the next problem and do it on your own. Pause the video and then replay when you're ready to check your answer. All right, so we have 12 and 37 thousandths rounded to the nearest tenth, which is this 0 right here. I'm going to look right next to it. I see there's a 3 next to it, which is less than 5, which means that the 0 is going to stay the same. And so my answer would be 12.0. Now I want you to pay very close attention. Even though we said that there doesn't need to be extra zeros, what place value did it say that we need to round to? The tenth, which means that there shouldn't be anything behind it, but it's okay to have that 0 right there because that is the 10th place. All right, let's apply your thinking. Select the value of each decimal number when it is rounded to the nearest whole number. So in all of these numbers right here in this table, we are rounding to the whole number. And then over here, it has a little checkbox to tell us, is it going to be rounded to a 3 or is it going to be rounded to a 4? Okay, so go ahead and pause this video. I want you to recreate this table in your notes, and I would like you to check, is that number going to be rounded to a 3 when it's rounded to a whole number, or is it going to be rounded to a 4? Check back to see your answers are correct. All right. So let's look at these numbers here. Remember, I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, which means that in this case, they're all 3s. I'm going to be looking what's next to the 3 in the tenths place to determine if I'm either rounding up or rounding down. So in this first one right here, 3 and 600ths. Right next door to the 3 is a 0, which means that that is less than 4, which means I'm not going to round the 3 up, so it will become just a 3. In the next one, 3 and 59 hundredths, the 5 makes the 3 get rounded up to a 4. In 3 and 47 thousandths, that 4 means that we keep the 3 alone and it becomes just a 3. And then in the last one, 3 and 92 hundredths, the 9 means that we round the 3 up to a 4. All right, it's time for the quiz. Go to Canvas to show what you have learned. Good luck.